The morning sun cast long shadows across the colony's main dome as Captain James Walker packed his bags. His hands moved quickly, mechanically, like they did when he was preparing for any other space mission. But this was different. This time, he wasn't coming back. The small apartment felt emptier than usual. Mary had gone to her early morning shift at the colony's research facility, unaware that her husband of 3 years had already submitted his transfer papers. On the kitchen counter, his wedding ring sat next to a short note. James couldn't bring himself to look at either. "Space is my true home," he muttered to himself, repeating the words he practiced in front of the mirror countless times. The excuse sounded hollow even to his own ears. Their last attempt at having children through the fertility clinic had failed, or so he thought. The treatments had been expensive, draining their savings and putting stress on their marriage. James remembered the look of hope in Mary's eyes during their last space journey to the medical station. They had tried one final treatment using advanced technology that was only available in deep space facilities. But 3 months had passed with no results, and James couldn't take it anymore. The space fleet had offered him command of their newest exploration vessel, the Stargazer. It was the kind of opportunity that came once in a lifetime. The 5-year mission would take him to the edges of known space, far from the responsibilities and disappointments of his failed marriage. What James couldn't know, was that at that very moment, Mary was sitting in her lab, staring at a medical screen with trembling hands. The test results were positive. Not just positive, but something the colony's doctors had never seen before. The embryos had taken, but they showed strange readings. 4 heartbeats, all perfectly in sync, and DNA patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. Back in their apartment, James finished packing. He looked around one last time at the home they had built together. Pictures lined the walls, their wedding day under the colony's artificial sky, their first deep space mission together when they were still starry-eyed cadets, the day Mary got her position as lead researcher. He took none of them. The transport ship would leave in 30 minutes. James had timed it perfectly. Mary wouldn't be back from her shift until evening. He told himself it was better this way. No messy goodbyes, no tears, no chance for her to change his mind with those eyes that still made his heart skip a beat. As he walked through the colony's corridors, people nodded respectfully. "Captain Walker," they said, not knowing this was the last time they would see him. The artificial lighting flickered slightly, a common occurrence in the older section of the colony. James remembered how Mary used to joke that the lights were dancing just for them when they first moved in. At the spaceport, the clerk barely glanced at his papers. "Heading to Central Command, Captain?" she asked routinely. Yes, James lied. He would be there only long enough to board the Stargazer. By the time Mary read his note, he would be in deep space, beyond any communication range. The transport ship hummed to life around him. Through the viewport, he could see the colony growing smaller. The massive dome that had been his home for 3 years shrank until it was just another light on the planet's surface. Somewhere down there, his wife was about to make a discovery that would change everything. James closed his eyes, telling himself this was for the best. He was meant for greater things than being a failed husband, a man who couldn't even give his wife the children she desperately wanted. The stars were calling him, and he had chosen them over everything else. Little did he know that his decision would come back to haunt him in ways he could never imagine. As his transport broke through the atmosphere, 4 tiny hearts continued to beat in perfect synchronization, carrying a secret that would reshape humanity's future and his own. 5 years had changed the colony more than James expected. The old dome he remembered had been expanded, now connected to 3 newer structures that gleamed under the alien sun. His inspection team's shuttle docked smoothly at the upgraded spaceport, everything running with an efficiency he hadn't seen during his time here. "Welcome to New Haven Colony, Captain Walker," the young officer beside him said, reading from his tablet. "Standard inspection should take 3 days. They've assigned Dr. Walker as our guide for the research facilities." James's heart stopped. "Dr. Walker?" "Yes, sir. Dr. Mary Walker, head of Xenobiology. She's made quite a name for herself. Something about breakthrough research in human adaptation to deep space conditions." The corridors felt both familiar and strange as James followed his team. New plants grew in carefully maintained beds along the walls. Mary's touch, he knew. She had always talked about making the colony feel more alive. They reached the research wing, and there she was. Mary stood at the entrance, her white lab coat crisp and professional. 5 years had added a few strands of silver to her hair, but her eyes were sharper than ever. She showed no surprise at seeing him. "Welcome to the research facility, gentlemen," she said, her voice steady. "I'll be showing you our latest developments." Her eyes met James for just a moment, and he saw something there, not anger or hurt, but a quiet strength that made him uncomfortable. The tour was thoroughly professional. Mary explained their projects with clear expertise, leading them through labs filled with strange specimens and advanced equipment. James noticed how other scientists looked at her with respect, even awe. Then they reached a large observation window overlooking what looked like a classroom. James glanced in casually, then froze. 4 children, all around 5 years old, sat at small desks. They were working on what appeared to be complex mathematical equations on floating holographic displays. But it wasn't their advanced studies that made James's blood run cold, it was their faces. Each child had his eyes, his jaw, even the small scar above his right eyebrow that he'd gotten in flight school. They moved with the same precise gestures he recognized from his own training videos. 4 perfect copies of himself at that age, but with a strange, almost ethereal quality to their movements. "Our special education program," Mary said smoothly to the group. "We've had remarkable success with enhanced learning techniques." But James couldn't move. One of the children looked up, meeting his gaze with eyes that seemed to glow slightly. The boy tilted his head in a gesture so familiar it hurt, the same way James did when solving a difficult problem. "How?" he whispered, but Mary was already leading the group forward. Later, after the other inspectors had gone to their quarters, James found Mary in her office. The same office where he'd left his ring and note 5 years ago. Both sat in a small frame on her desk, preserved like specimens in one of her labs. "They're mine, aren't they?" His voice shook. "Ours?" Mary looked up from her work. "You remember our last treatment at the Deep Space Medical Station? The one you decided was a failure after 3 months?" She pulled up a holographic display showing 4 DNA strands that seemed to shimmer and change as they watched. Something happened during that journey through the quantum fold. Something that changed everything. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her laugh was soft but held no humor. "You left before breakfast, James. Left a note saying space was your true home." She stood, her presence somehow filling the room. "Well, you got your wish. These children are as much space as they are human. And they're just the beginning." A small sound made James turn. In the doorway stood all 4 boys, watching him with those familiar yet alien eyes. They moved in perfect unison, each step synchronized as if they shared one mind. "Dad," they said together, their voices creating a harmony that made the air itself seem to vibrate. "We've been waiting for you." James Walker, the man who had fled to the stars, finally understood what true wonders he had left behind. And somewhere in the deep space he'd chosen over his family, something was stirring, awakening, drawn to the children who carried its gift. James sat in Mary's lab, watching through a window as the quadruplets played with what looked like broken computer parts. His hands shook as he held the medical reports Mary had just shown him. The boys, Tom, Jack, Ray, and Will moved with an uncanny coordination that made the hair on his neck stand up. "Watch this," Mary said, pressing a button that released a new piece of technology into their play area. It was a broken navigation computer, something that would challenge even trained engineers. The 4 boys looked up at once, then gathered around the device. Their hands moved in perfect sync, and within minutes, the dead machine hummed to life. They hadn't just fixed it, they'd improved it. "How is this possible?" James asked, his voice barely a whisper. Mary pulled up a holographic display showing a recording from 5 years ago. "Remember that strange light we passed through on our way to the medical station, the one that made all our instruments go crazy for a few seconds?" James nodded. He remembered being worried about Mary, who was carrying their newly treated embryos in a stasis pod at the time. "That wasn't just some random space phenomenon," Mary continued. "Look at this." She zoomed in on a DNA strand that seemed to dance with colors that shouldn't exist. "Whatever we passed through, it changed them at their core. They can heal from injuries in hours. They understand complex machines just by touching them. And their minds. She paused, looking at her sons with a mixture of pride and worry. As if hearing her thoughts, all 4 boys turned to look at their parents. They smiled, the same smile, at the same time. "We're getting better at controlling it, Mom," they said in unison, their voices creating that strange harmony that seemed to vibrate through the air. James watched as Tom, or was it Jack? They were so identical, picked up a broken tablet. The screen flickered to life under his touch, codes and numbers flowing across it faster than any human could input them. "Last week," Mary said quietly, "Ray got hurt playing in the greenhouse. A bad cut. Before I could even get the medical kit, the others gathered around him. They shared the pain somehow. The wound healed in minutes." "And the space fleet?" James asked, already dreading the answer. He knew how his superiors thought how they would see these children. Mary's face hardened. "They don't know everything. I've been careful. The official reports show them as gifted but normal children." But she hesitated. "Someone's getting suspicious. There have been questions. Too many questions." One of the boys, Will, walked up to the window and placed his hand against it. The others followed, each movement mirroring the others perfectly. The glass seemed to frost under their touch, patterns of light dancing across its surface. "They want to run tests," James realized, horror growing in his chest. "That's why this inspection was scheduled." Mary nodded grimly. "Your team includes 2 scientists from the fleet's Special Projects Division. They're not here to inspect the colony." She turned to face him fully. "They're here for our sons." The lights in the lab flickered, and James noticed all 4 boys had stopped moving. They stood perfectly still, their eyes closed as if listening to something no one else could hear. "They're coming," the quadruplets said together, their voices carrying a weight that made the air feel heavy. "The ones who changed us. They want to see what we've become." James looked at Mary, seeing the same fear and determination in her eyes that he felt. In that moment, all the years of separation seemed to vanish. He had abandoned his family once for the stars. He wouldn't make the same mistake again. "How long?" he asked. 3 days, the boys answered, opening their eyes. They glowed faintly in the dim lab light. "The ship that changed us is coming back. And it's not alone." Outside the colony's dome, the alien sun set on another day, but somewhere in the depths of space, something vast and ancient was stirring, drawn to the 4 small beings who carried its gift. The truth had emerged, but it was only the beginning of a much larger story. The colony's night cycle had just begun when James noticed the extra security guards. They tried to look casual, but he recognized their stance. Fleet Special Operations, pretending to be regular colony security. They were watching the research wing far too closely. In Mary's lab, the quadruplets sat in a circle, their hands linked. Strange patterns of light danced across their skin as they communicated in their own silent way. Mary worked at her computer, deleting files, while James kept watch at the door. "They're planning to move tonight," Tom said suddenly, his voice echoing slightly as if coming from far away. His brothers nodded in unison. "Commander Reed signed the order an hour ago," Jack added. "They think we're dangerous," Ray continued. "They want to study us," Will finished. Mary's fingers flew across her keyboard. "I've encrypted the most important research files. They can't know everything about the boys' abilities." She looked at James with worried eyes. "But we can't stay here much longer." James peeked through the door's window again. More guards had arrived, and he spotted Dr. Peters from Special Projects talking to someone on a comm unit. The man's face was grim. "How many escape routes do we have?" James asked, falling back into his military training. 2, Mary answered. "The maintenance tunnels under the lab and the greenhouse emergency exit. But they'll be watching both." The boys stood up together, their movements fluid and synchronized. "There's another way," they said in harmony. "But you have to trust us." Before either parent could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the lab. "Attention all personnel," a voice announced. "This is a Level 1 security lockdown. Please remain in your current locations. This is not a drill." "They're coming," Ray said, his eyes glowing brighter. James heard heavy boots in the corridor. "We're out of time." Mary grabbed a small device from her desk, a portable drive containing years of research. "Whatever we do it now." The quadruplets joined hands again, forming a circle around their parents. The air began to hum with energy, and James felt his skin tingle. "Don't be afraid," the boys said together. "We learned this from them." The lab door burst open. Commander Reed stood there with 6 armed guards, Dr. Peters right behind them. "Nobody move," Reed ordered. "This is a fleet security operation." But something strange was happening. The light around the family began to bend and twist. James felt Mary grab his hand, squeezing it tight. "The children are fleet property now," Dr. Peters said, stepping forward. "Their abilities must be studied for humanity's safety and progress." "We don't belong to anyone," the quadruplets answered, their voices creating that haunting harmony that made the air itself vibrate. The guards raised their weapons, but they seemed unsure. The light in the room was behaving strangely, swirling around the family like a protective cyclone. "This is your last warning," Reed shouted over the growing hum of energy. "Stand down and release the children into fleet custody." James looked at his sons, these incredible beings he had almost lost the chance to know. They smiled at him with perfect synchronization, their eyes now glowing like stars. "Close your eyes," they told their parents. The energy in the room reached a peak. James felt as if every atom in his body was singing. Through his closed eyelids, he saw a flash of light so bright it turned the world white. When he opened his eyes again, the lad was gone. They stood in a vast chamber of flowing metal and pulsing light. And they weren't alone. "Welcome," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We have been waiting for you." Behind them, through what looked like a window into space, they could see the colony growing smaller and smaller, and the fleet ships scrambling in confusion. The quadruplets had taken them somewhere impossible, somewhere that would change everything. James and Mary stood in awe within the alien chamber. The walls seemed alive, flowing with patterns of light that reminded them of their son's eyes. The quadruplets looked completely at home here, their small hands touching the strange surfaces with familiar ease. "Don't be afraid," Tom said, turning to his parents. "They're the ones who changed us." "They've been watching us grow," Jack added. "Learning from us," Ray continued. "While we learned from them, we'll finished." A figure appeared before them, formed from light and flowing metal. It wasn't exactly human-shaped, but it wasn't completely alien either. When it spoke, the words formed directly in their minds. "We are the Watchers," it said. "We search the galaxy for species ready to take the next step in evolution. Your children are our greatest success." Mary stepped forward, her scientist's curiosity overcoming her fear. "The light we passed through 5 years ago, that was you." "Yes," the being answered. "We saw potential in your species, but we needed to test it carefully. Your embryos provided the perfect opportunity. We did not expect such remarkable results." The chamber shifted around them, showing images of other worlds, other species. Some looked almost human, others completely foreign. All seemed to be at different stages of development. "But why our children?" James asked, his protective instincts rising. "Why experiment on them without permission?" The quadruplets answered together, "Because humanity is ready to evolve, Dad. But it needs guides." The alien being moved closer. "Your children are more than experiments. They are bridges between our peoples. Through them, humanity can learn to reach its full potential without the centuries of conflict that other species endured." Suddenly, alarms began flashing through the chamber. The boys turned as one, their eyes wide. "The fleet found us," they said. "They're preparing to fire on this ship." Images appeared showing several fleet warships approaching their position. Commander Reed's voice crackled through some kind of communication system. "Unknown vessel, you have kidnapped fleet personnel and valuable research subjects. Surrender immediately, or we will open fire." James looked at his family, then at the alien being. Years of fleet training warred with his parental instincts. Finally, he made his choice. "Can you help us show them the truth?" he asked the being. "Show them that this isn't about weapons or power, but about humanity's future." The Watcher seemed to smile, though it had no real face. "That is exactly what we hoped you would ask." The quadruplets gathered in the center of the chamber, joining hands. The alien energy flowing through the ship seemed to concentrate around them. "Mom, Dad," they said together, "hold our hands. We can show everyone what's really happening." Mary took Tom and Jack's hands, while James held onto Ray and Will. The energy flowed through all of them now, and James finally understood what his sons had been experiencing all these years. He saw the universe as they saw it, interconnected, alive with possibilities. He felt the Watcher's ancient knowledge, their hope for humanity's peaceful evolution. Most importantly, he felt his sons' love and their desire to help humanity grow. The chamber filled with light as the family's joined consciousness reached out to the fleet ships. In every vessel, on every view screen, the truth appeared. Not as words or pictures, but as pure understanding. Commander Reed and his crew saw humanity's potential future, not one of weapons and fear, but of growth and discovery. They saw what the quadruplets represented, not test subjects, but guides to a greater destiny. The weapon locks disengaged. The fleet ship stood down. "This is Commander Reed." The communication system crackled again, his voice changed by what he'd seen. I understand now. We all do." The Watcher moved to stand beside the family. "This is only the beginning," it said. "Your children will help humanity understand its place among the stars, and we will help you protect them while they do." James looked at Mary, seeing in her eyes the same wonder he felt. They had found something far greater than either of them had imagined when they first tried to have children. Their family wasn't just healing, it was becoming something extraordinary. Not everyone in the fleet accepted the truth as easily as Commander Reed. 3 days after their escape, James stood in the colony's main conference room, facing the fleet's high command through a massive holographic screen. Mary and the quadruplets sat behind him, while the Watcher's ship hovered visibly outside the colony's dome, its presence impossible to ignore. "This is unprecedented," Admiral Harris said, her face stern on the screen. "You're asking us to believe that alien beings deliberately modified human children, and we should just accept this." "They're still human," Mary spoke up, her voice strong. "They're just more than what we thought possible." The quadruplets stood together, their movements synchronized as always. The lights in the room dimmed slightly, responding to their presence. "Let us show you," they said in their haunting harmony, "like we showed Commander Reed." The fleet officers on the screen shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Peters, who had once wanted to study the children like lab specimens, stepped forward from the back of the room. "I've analyzed the data," he said, surprising everyone. "What these children can do, it's not a weapon, it's an advancement. They understand technology in ways that could advance our science by centuries." As if to demonstrate, the boys turned to the room's central computer. The holographic display shifted, showing complex equations and designs that made the fleet scientists gasp. "These are solutions to problems we've been working on for decades," one admiral whispered. Tom touched a console, and new images appeared. "This is how to improve your ship engines," he said. "This will help protect colonies from solar flares," Jack added, bringing up another design. "And this," Ray continued, showing another set of plans, "can help us communicate across galaxies." All gifts from the Watchers were finished through us. The room fell silent. James watched the fleet officers' faces, seeing the conflict between fear and amazement. Suddenly, alarms blared through the colony. A junior officer burst into the conference room. "Admiral, 3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace. It's the Omega Division." James's heart sank. The Omega Division, the fleet's secret military branch, known for dealing with problems that the regular fleet couldn't handle. The quadruplets looked up at once. "They're going to try to take us," they said. "They don't care about understanding. They just want power." Outside, 3 black ships approached the colony, their weapons clearly armed. The Watcher's ship moved to intercept them. "This is exactly what we feared," Admiral Harris said. "Omega Division acts on its own authority. They'll try to seize the children by force." James stepped forward, his captain's training taking over. "Then help us stop them. Show them that the fleet stands for discovery, not conquest." The boys joined hands, their eyes glowing brighter than ever. "We can protect ourselves," they said, "but we don't want to fight." The Omega ships launched their first attack, not at the colony, but at the Watcher's vessel. The alien ship absorbed the shots like they were nothing. Then something remarkable happened. The quadruplets raised their hands together, and every screen in the colony lit up, not just with images, but with pure understanding, showing everyone the truth about humanity's place in the universe. The Omega ship's weapons powered down. Their commanders could no longer ignore the reality the children showed them. "Stand down, Omega Division," Admiral Harris ordered, her voice firm. "These children are not a threat to be contained. They're our future." The black ship hung motionless in space. The Watcher's ship pulsed with gentle light, acknowledging the peaceful resolution. James felt Mary's hand slip into his. Their sons had done it, not through force or fear, but through understanding. They had shown everyone a better way. "This is just the first step," the quadruplets said, smiling at their parents. "Humanity has so much more to learn." Outside the colony's dome, the alien sun rose on a new day, and with it, the dawn of a new era for humanity. The confrontation had ended not with violence, but with hope. 1 year later, the colony looked very different. New buildings had sprouted up around the original dome, their designs a perfect blend of human and Watcher technology. At the center stood the Stellar Academy, where the quadruplets and other gifted children now learned and grew together. James walked through the academy's halls, nodding at students who passed by. Some had eyes that glowed faintly like his son's, showing they too carried the Watcher's gift. After the truth about the quadruplets became known, other families came forward with children who showed similar abilities. He found Mary in her new laboratory, much bigger than her old one. She was working with a group of scientists, some human, some appearing as shimmering forms of light, Watchers who had chosen to stay and help. "The new testing results are amazing," she told him, her eyes bright with excitement. "We've found 20 more children across different colonies who carry traces of the same changes. The evolution is spreading naturally now." "Dad," 4 voices called in perfect harmony. The quadruplets appeared from different corners of the lab, moving with their usual perfect coordination. At 6 years old, they looked even more like him, but their eyes held wisdom far beyond their years. "Ready for the demonstration?" Tom asked. "Admiral Harris is waiting," Jack added. Along with representatives from 12 colonies, Ray continued. "They'd all want to see what's possible now. We're finished." James smiled. A year ago, he had been running away from family life. Now he couldn't imagine being anywhere else. The boys led their parents to the academy's main hall, where a large crowd had gathered. Admiral Harris stood at the front, looking much friendlier than she had during their first confrontation. Next to her, Commander Reed beamed with pride. He had become one of the academy's strongest supporters. The quadruplets took their places in the center of the hall. Other gifted children joined them, forming a circle. The air hummed with energy as they joined hands. "What you're about to see," Mary addressed the crowd, "is just the beginning of what humanity can achieve." The children raised their hands together. Above them, the ceiling seemed to disappear, showing a view of space unlike anything normal human eyes could see. The universe appeared alive, interconnected, full of possibilities. "We can shape the future," the quadruplets said together, their voices creating that beautiful harmony. Not through force, but through understanding. Images appeared in the air, new technologies, cleaner ways to power ships, better ways to grow food in space, faster methods of travel between stars. All gifts from the Watchers, but adapted perfectly for human use by minds that bridged both species. A shimmering Watcher appeared beside James. "Your children have exceeded our greatest hopes," it said in his mind. "They've shown us that humanity was the right choice." James watched as his sons demonstrated their abilities, teaching other children to use their own gifts. He felt Mary's hand slip into his and squeeze it gently. "I almost missed all of this," he said quietly. Mary leaned against him. "But you came back. That's what matters." In the center of the hall, the quadruplets looked over at their parents and smiled, the same smile at the same time. They had forgiven him long ago, understanding things about time and choice that even he was just beginning to grasp. The demonstration ended with a burst of light that left everyone gasping in wonder. As the crowd broke into applause, James realized that his greatest adventure hadn't been in deep space after all. It had been right here, with the family he had almost lost. The boys ran back to their parents, surrounding them in a group hug that felt like being wrapped in starlight. "We love you, Dad," they said together, their voices making the air sing. Outside the academy's windows, the colony stretched out under the alien sun, growing and changing just like humanity itself. And beyond that, The stars waited, not as an escape anymore, but as a future they would explore together. James Walker, the man who had once run away from his family, had finally found his true home among the stars he had always loved. Only now he wasn't alone. He was part of something much bigger, much more wonderful than he had ever imagined possible.